Hey, what's going on? Welcome to the Walk Podcast, powered by Model Match. In this episode, we talked to Jamie Brown, Southeast Regional Vice President for AmeriFirst Mortgage. He's based out of Florida, and boy, we covered the gamut. We went from talking about his experiences as a perfume salesman, selling perfume on the streets of Florida in 100-degree temperature in a full suit, and what that taught him on a go-forward basis, other than knowing that you don't want to sell perfume in 100-degree temperature in a full suit. We also talked about family and faith. We talked about culture and what it means in his business. We also had a good back and forth at the end about the role of the loan officer in the mortgage industry going forward, how it's changed over the years, and how maybe it might change or might not on a go-forward basis. Really good conversation. Jamie's a great guy. I enjoyed talking to him. Thanks for joining us on The Walk. Jamie Brown, thank you for joining us on The Walk. You did set the stage a little bit, and I'll let you clean it up here, but regional manager plus for AmeriFirst down in Florida. I've gotten to know you pretty well by working with you and the team and some support of some strategic growth efforts. And one of the reasons why we do this podcast is because we get to know a lot of people on both sides of the equation, and we learn really quickly that a lot of the things that define who you are, obviously as an individual, but also as an organization and as a team, are the experiences that you've had over time, which sort of shape who you are today. And so really excited to have you on. You and I have had lots of conversations about obviously business and mortgage, but family and life in general. And I've seen how you've been able to transition a lot of that to those folks that you create value for. I wanted to maybe kick off a little bit here with, I'm always intrigued by how people get into this business. I didn't go to college and graduate with a degree in whatever this degree would have been called, recruiting, strategic growth, consulting, whatever. You didn't go to college, and I don't think you went in and said, boy, I'm going to be a mortgage banker someday. So how do you go from political science to mortgage banking? How'd that happen?
So it happened like this. I decided that my first day of class, my junior year, it was 40 below in rural Wisconsin. And I just said, there is no way I'm going to live in that post-graduating college. So I knew about a year later I was going to be done. I was not going to law school. And so I just packed up and I moved to Florida, and I sold perfume on the streets, like knockoff perfume in a suit. That was my first post-grad. I have a college degree in political science and sociology job.
It's so good.
Great idea in August. If you've never been to Florida in August, a suit is not the way to go.
Right.
Post that, I sold Kirby vacuum cleaners, where you had to go to people's house and show them how it worked.
Right.
Again, realization that maybe this just wasn't what I had gone to school for. So I paid a headhunter $2,400 to get me a job. And they said, well, what do you know about mortgages? I said, I know nothing. And she slid across the table to me a book that was entitled Mortgages for Dummies. No joke. Yep.
I didn't know that there was one.
Back in the day, remember, you could get a book on dummies for anything. Well, this one,
that's true. Right.
This one applied to me. And so I went to work for a company that it was the 10-10-10 policy, 10% interest rate, 10-year term, 10 points. And you sold credit life with every deal.
What year would that have been?
That would have been January of 96.
Okay.
So that's the gray and the beard. That's not, I didn't put that on as special effects. That's real. And so, that's kind of where my first real mentor and coach came in. I was lucky or blessed enough to, at that time, even through just some crazy stuff, to have a woman named Joyce Miller. And she was about 20 years older than me. And she kind of just took me under her wing, and she showed me all the things and the ways that you could do this business, how to be relational, so how to properly call in a real estate agent or properly call in a client. And so I just went under her wing for probably about 18 months. She left the company, that we both did actually, but she left the company and she went and started her own company and brought me under her wing, encouraged me to go and start my own company. So I did in April of 97. Mm-hmm. And then, from 97 to 2010, I was holding my own shingle and learning all the tricks of the trade. Nothing like being a 23-year-old kid with your own shingle.
No kidding. And that's a quick turn. I mean, so you did that for maybe a little over a year before you went and started your own thing?
Yep.
So I have to, I mean, I'm a big believer that everything you do, you're going to learn something, and you may not realize that you learned it until a year from now or 5 years from now or 10 years from now. What did the only thing that selling perfume in the 100-degree temperature in a suit teach you that you didn't want to sell perfume in a suit in a 100-degree temperature? Or were there other takeaways from that that helped put you in a position to be successful selling mortgages?
Well, what it taught me was my dad and my grandfather were both sales guys growing up. My grandfather was a cattle hauler. My dad was a financial planner of life insurance. And so being in sales and being relational was something that we had. It just taught me that if you had relational skills, you could do whatever you wanted to. What I realized about selling perfume was the margin was really, really low, and you had to sell a lot of it to make any money. And that just didn't seem to fit. Mortgages, though, if you did it right and you did it in the right way, in the right space, you could make a generational changing difference in your world.
Was there a point at which you knew, okay, this is what I want to do? Like, this is going to be who I am. This is going to be my career. Was it a means to an end in the beginning where you knew I need to make a little bit of money? I need to maybe start to build a little bit of a nest egg so I can then go figure out what I want to do? Or was it pretty quick? I'm curious, when did that moment come where you knew this is who I am? This is what I'm going to do?
It's interesting as we started to talk through today, and I looked back at Joyce and what she meant. It was really within a week or two. I got the privilege of meeting her husband, who was a high-level CEO at a Fortune 500 company, and so they did well. Joyce had a family, and she had a young son who was 10 at the time. And ironically enough, I'm helping him with his first home 20-something years later, so it's kind of a weird circle of life, right? She's retired now. But I saw what she had. I saw the quality of life that she had. But honestly, at 22, 23 years old, I saw the kind of car she drove, the house that she lived in,
right,
the lifestyle. And I was like, wait, if I put some mind, to your point, if I put some effort into this, I could really do something with some grit and some discipline. So it was pretty quick.
Then as things evolved for you, so you had your own company. I'm assuming you were set up as a broker back then?
Yep.
And how long did you do that?
14 years. It evolved from a broker to a correspondent lender. We went from, a couple of people to at one point over 100 people. Okay. Then, like everybody else, the world sort of fell out a little bit, but we maintained what we were doing. We maintained discipline for another 3 years. And then the world shifted a little bit when I met Doug Long, who I ended up working for then and is my partner now. So life has an interesting way of bringing really, really intelligent and successful people into my world.
Did you, so once you started building a company, and I'm assuming started hiring other people to be a part of that company, how did your mindset then change? And I guess my question is, some people are built to manage and enjoy managing, other people not so much. Did you know that that's something that you wanted to do? Did you sort of figure it out as you went? At what point did you know, hey, this growing a staff and dealing with that side of it is also something that I'm good at and I enjoy?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, because there's two parts in that statement. The first is, what I learned really early on is nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I can't wait to be managed today, right? Like, not in a marriage, not in a relationship, not in a workplace. They want to be led. And so I was always, from a really young age, I was either a leader or a captain on the sports teams that I was part of. Even when I got out of college and I moved down, I volunteered to go be an assistant basketball coach at a local high school for 5 years. And so leading and being sort of a person of example, while I didn't think like super highly of myself in an arrogant way, I knew that I had some qualities that if I could impart some wisdom and I could use some of my life experiences, that would be a good ideal. Well, in 2002, so about 5 years after we started, there was a pivot point with this girl who we were just talking about that went to Permian High. And for the first 5 years, I did what most people that are good salespeople do, is they show up and they throw up, right? I talked about myself. I talked about the company. I never asked any questions at all. And I certainly didn't listen. Well, she taught me the art of asking a question and listening, and then asking a follow-up question and asking another question. And so that pivot point, along with a newly established relationship with Christ, really allowed me to understand that this wasn't about me. It was about the we, right? It was about the other people that we could help bring into that fold. So no, I did not wake up one day and say, I love to manage people.
Right.
I know that was a long question, but I think I want to ask you the same question back,
Sure.
right? Which is, we talk about being recruiters all the time, and I think that sort of has a negative connotation. How do you, Eric, with your team, how do you select the people that you work with? And how do you select the people that, you guys are all trying to help build other companies' teams and our team for that matter?
That's a great question. And I will guess that there's probably some similarities with the way that you go about it as well. What I've learned over time is I can't motivate someone to get out of bed. I used to think I could. I wanted to think that I could. I wanted to think that I was Coach Taylor from Friday Night Lights and I could say something magical in the locker room that took you from being a C- player to being the one that's going to, fill the A gap and crush the fullback for a 2-yard loss. It took me a long time to figure out that I can maybe together with others help you take steps forward, but I can't motivate you to get out of bed in the morning. So one of the things that I guess I look for is with what we do, at least, so our company has multiple divisions, right? And one of them is a recruiting group that helps mortgage companies grow. And those folks have a lot of conversations with a lot of people every day. And I call it, they're kind of digging ditches because there's a lot, you're hitting a lot of rocks and you're hitting a lot of roots and you're having to turn and maybe I should dig over here. And this has more fertile ground over here. The ability to just have that inside of you, I don't think is something that I can teach. I can teach you how to be more efficient. I can teach you how to be a little bit better at it, but you got to pick up the shovel. So I've also found that someone with an athlete's mentality doesn't have to be someone that was an all-star in high school or played varsity all the way through or played college sports, but there's a mentality that comes with athletics, I think, or competition in general. That's one of the things that I look for, Jamie. And we have folks on our team that may have never played a sport, but you can sense and see that they have that mentality when you have a conversation with them. It's like it's like in baseball, right? If you're hitting 300, you're doing pretty good.
Yep.
That means you're not hitting the ball. You're not getting on base 70% of the time. How do you interpret that 70%? Is it a failure or is it I needed that to happen that might be negative at the moment to be able to get to the thing that's going to be positive. That it's okay that just happened. Move on to the next thing. I think about on the mortgage side, originators a lot, right? We're talking about managing. A lot of times originators will say, hey, if I'm going to make a move or if I'm going to explore next step for me is maybe managing or building a branch. I love the opportunity to talk through with them what that actually means. If you build a branch, what does that do for you? How does that create value for you? Make it really, really selfish at first and then see what it turns into. So kind of coming back to you, I think managing originators has to be a really difficult thing, right? These are eat what you kill, 100% commission. From time to time, the company says pump the brakes. The industry's dealing with capacity issues like we have been in the last month or so. And so you're asking somebody to do something that you're motivating them in the opposite direction most of the time. How are you dealing with things, or how do you deal with things like that? How do you coach an LO to toe the company line, so to speak, when in fact the way that they're being motivated from a compensation perspective is to do everything they can to fill the pipeline? However way they can fill it.
Yeah, I think it goes back to it's really more than just about the paycheck, right? You and I have had this conversation multiple times that when we're coaching and leading people, you have to talk about the 3 different ways that they have to be a steward, right? It's time, it's their talent, and it's their treasure. And I think it's really in that order. And so during like this last 6 weeks, it's been a huge blessing across the mortgage business, right? If you're not busy and you're not productive right now, you must be buried under a rock. and I don't mean that disingenuously. I just mean there are loans coming in from every angle. You almost can't help but get deals right now, right? Mm. But where you really have to be that good steward, to your point, is the company, AmeriFirst, or wherever you are, is asking you to be a good steward of your time. It's to take what you're doing and consider the preciousness of others. Who is that processor? Who's that underwriter? Who's that closer? Who's that post closer that you're going to be having to deal with? Because you're not arrogantly going to be more important than the guy to your right or to your left. So be a good steward of your time. Take that extra 5 minutes, right, and put that extra effort, to your point, right? We can't teach effort, but we can teach discipline. Put that extra discipline behind a proper application. Yes, you might not get that one deal that you would have fought for 6 weeks ago, but you don't have to do that now. You can actually have a larger community impact by doing some of the things that your competition can't do. That's what AmeriFirst is really preaching right now, right? Which is we have an opportunity to really help and impact as our own stimulus, right? The government, I don't know if you got a stimulus check. Lots of people did, right? But if you refinance your house, or if you're purchasing a home and you can skip a month or two payment, or you can drop $400, $500, $600 in payment, isn't that a stimulus for you too? So I know we went down a rabbit hole there, but my point is that you have to be able to pivot. I don't like the term toe the company line, so I'm going to dismiss that.
Yeah, you could throw that one out.
What I believe in is that we believe in our core values, which is, if you believe every day, I'm going to wake up today, I'm going to do the next right thing that's in front of me. I'm going to have a desperate desire to make a meaningful impact in the lives of somebody today, right? Whether it's a client, an allied resource, a partner, my wife, my child, my branch manager in Tampa with her spouse, or something that somebody else is going through. Where can I make a meaningful impact in the life of somebody else today? If I'm looking for that every day, and I'm a loan officer, a branch manager, an area manager, or the owner of the company, that's a win. That's a big win every day.
You sticking on that topic, and something you and I have talked about before, or at least I've heard you talk about, is financial security. And when you whether you're accepting a new position and you're thinking about what the offer terms look like, or you're purchasing a home or refinancing a home, or you're just getting started straight out of college and you're disciplined enough to just start to put $5 away from every paycheck, financial security, financial independence, financial preparedness. I had the former FEMA administrator on the podcast several weeks ago. And this is a real thing that Brock Long, is passionate about, and that is financial preparedness. Of course, a FEMA guy is going to be passionate about mitigation and preparedness, but what I think he's really realized in his time at FEMA is how unprepared most people are in the event of emergencies. Right now, we're in the midst of one of those emergencies for a lot of people. And I know for you, we've talked about the value that a mortgage banker can represent to a consumer in supporting them in their preparedness. Do you feel like the industry is doing a good job of that? Does the industry as a whole, and I can guess you're going to say I can speak from AmeriFirst experience and from your experience and not necessarily the industry. I worry sometimes, though, that too much of the industry and originators view what they do as selling a commodity and not really selling a service, and the opportunity to consult with someone around how to make their position financially better. Can you talk about that for a little bit, not only in how you communicate with the consumer, because I am curious how you can, if I come to you and I say, Jamie, I'm buying a house, I already know I'm going to qualify. I already know my income's good, my DTI, my FICO, it's all going to be great. I just need you to do the loan because I trust you. Are you going to take a moment and actually back me up and get me to think about other things? I guess that's question number one. Question number two is, how do you then coach a loan officer to do that when you're kind of asking them, at least their perception might be, that you're back, why can't I just sell it? Just let me close it. Don't ask me to back up and maybe throw a monkey wrench in this. Can you talk about both for just a second?
Sure. So let's talk about the consumer first, right? So in your example, you call and you say, look, I got an 800 credit score. I got 40% to put down. I work for Model Match. I'm wildly successful, right?
We're getting there.
The idea that relationship never even gets off the ground, and to your point, just becomes a commodity. It's just a transaction at that point. It's just not something I'm interested in doing. If you're 25, 30, 35 years old, there's a good chance we're going to probably come together 4, 5, 6 times through the course of your lifetime. And you're going to, if I have a relationship with you, you're going to probably refer me on average 10 people over that same time period. Well, that's a relationship. If I go to Best Buy and I buy something, that's just a transaction, right? If I go to Wells Fargo and I make a checking deposit, it's just a transaction. I don't want transactional loan officers, branch managers. We want relationship managers. One of the things we talked about earlier was 18 years ago, I learned from my wife, she was a communications major and a journalist. And so her whole job was to interview people. And so that, along with mentoring and coaching, so now we're going to pivot, right? So now it's not just you, the consumer, but it's also you, the loan officer. It's you, the branch manager. How do we get deeper and wider, right, in our relationships? Not how do we just do a transaction? One of the things that I ask, I've had 2 or 3 recruiting calls today, right? And in those calls today, I lead with, tell me about your family. What's important in your world? What's your why? I want to know those things before we talk one thing about really anything to do with your experience or your industry or the number of transactions or the kinds of loans. All of that is, I can find that data out. That's easy. What I can't find out is what makes you tick. Why do you have this special affinity for your daughter who's actually doing something on the side to help you with a sickness that maybe you had, right? You have to ask those questions. When you know those questions, then you can go deeper with that relationship, which means that in times of trouble or in strife, whether it's with a realtor or with your own teammate, you're going to have that built-in trust and equity. That you're not just as good as your last loan, you're as good as the depth of your relationship. And so if you look at my team as an example, or our team, I've got guys that have worked for me for decades. And that's not because I've had the best rate or the best technology or the slickest CRM. It's because they know that when they call and say, hey, Jamie, will you pray about this for me? Or will you, hey, I got something that's bugging me, and will you listen? I do. And it's not disingenuous.
Have you had?
So I think that.
And not to interrupt you, I'm curious though. Have you had people that have been part of your team before that were maybe really young in their career, and you're one of the things I love about what you just did is you didn't just point out best practices, you gave metrics. I mean, you gave numbers and metrics, which I think is important. But have you had people that were maybe younger in their career and really guns a-blazing, thrill of the kill, make as much money as I possibly can, that left you and then came back at some point because they needed to figure some of this out for themselves first before what you just said really meant something to them?
Yeah, I'll answer that without getting super specific on who the individual is or who those individuals are. It's kind of 2 people. There's a gentleman who I got to know him and his wife and his kids about 8 years ago, and he left because somebody offered him 25 more basis points per loan. He went out there, and 6 months later he left, and he was a little embarrassed, so he went someplace else, and then he went someplace else. And then finally, just through conversation, I was always keeping in touch with him, just checking in on him and his wife. And they went through some really hard marital issues, right? People with kids go through marital issues. Can I get an amen?
Amen. Thomas is well, how old is Kennedy?
I better get this right because Brittany hears it later. 20 months?
20 months.
20 months?
Thomas is in a different spot. His marriage is fine. Brittany, if you're listening, everything's great. Yeah, we can all relate. I've got a 20-year-old, so I'm on a different side of the battles from time to time. But yes, I digress.
Right. So with 7 kids, I understand the whole marital strife. My deal with him was, I just want to pray with you and your wife. And he would call me and we would talk through things that were going on with that. It had nothing to do with work. And then, not super shockingly, he decided that, it didn't matter if somebody else was paying me 25 basis points or 10 basis points more. What I had was a real relationship. I knew that when I picked up the phone and called Jamie at 7:30 and was, ready to walk out the door, he would walk me off the ledge. Well, he's been with me. They just celebrated their 25-year wedding anniversary yesterday. And I'm on the phone talking to both him and his wife, and just the joy that they have. He's gone from 7 to 8 unit a month guy. He closed 27 loans this month.
Wow, what a story. Yeah.
He didn't have that support at the other places. This isn't about me, right? This was just surrounding him with the right people, but staying intentional and staying relational with him and his family. So I know his kids' names, I know his wife's name. Our kids go to college, for crying out loud, right? That's the depth of the relationship. And so you know this, that recruiting is one thing. Retention is a whole nother art, and it's a whole nother animal. And I think that as long as you're continuing to get relational with your team, then retention becomes a lot easier.
And it's all part of the same process. It's not the same step in the process, but it is all part of the same process. You earlier said that maybe you don't like the term recruiting, or it doesn't do it justice, or something along. I agree. I can't stand it. I don't think it represents at least what you do. Look, you're recruiting realtor partners, builder partners, CPAs, attorneys. You're recruiting consumers, but you're not doing it in a way where you're trying to convince them to do something that they don't want to do. The recruiting starts by just building a relationship, finding some common ground. The other thing that you mentioned that I think is really worth always remembering is that even if a partnership breaks down at some point, but it doesn't break down for terrible reasons, nobody did anything all that awful, that as long as you can stay strong and continue to know who you are and be who you are, those opportunities might still have an opportunity to come back around for all the right reasons, whether it's the originator you just mentioned, or a consumer, or a referral partner, or another business partner of any kind. I think when I was younger, I was probably really bad at that. I'd probably get emotional about a loss, and I'd let my emotions show, and I probably wouldn't get that at bat again. You take a breath and think of the long game, though. And also, Jamie, for you, I know that faith is a very important thing to you, and you're only going to do things one way. And that probably really helps you stay on point when things go sideways. It's always interesting to me, though, that when you stay consistent and predictable, that thing might come back around again because you've given yourself an opportunity for it to happen.
Yeah, that's totally true. So you are right? My faith, going back to sort of that pivot point in 2002 where my relationship with Christ became real. I'm still a wretched, deserving of hell. Thank you, Jesus, for loving me enough to not go there, sinner. But what I've learned is, to your point, is that if you just treat people the right way, and you don't get super emotional around their emotional decision. You said something just a minute ago, right? You can't convince somebody against their will. Well, one of my mentors says, if you're talking to somebody, a person convinced against their will is of the same opinion still, right? So I don't want to have to convince you. I did that 97 to 2002. If I have to sell you on me, that's a wrong relationship. I want to know about you. I want to select you as a realtor partner, as a builder, as a loan officer, as a branch manager, as a leader. We're in the selection process, right? Culture is this buzzword that's in all the industries right now. Our culture is great. Our culture is great. Culture is what you make it, and it's how you protect it. I was going to ask you this question, right? Which is, how do you keep a boundary around the culture of your group as a leader so that you don't bring in guys or girls that don't abide by the things that you believe in? Because I know it's important to me.
I think the simple answer is I include them in the process. That's the simple answer. You know that I'm a big believer that when it comes to building a team, that the people that you build with need to develop relationships with people other than you so that they can see the consistency and predictability in the messaging of the organization. Culture is a word, but you know it when you feel it. You don't know it when it's written on a piece of paper. I know you better by knowing a little bit about your family and a little bit about your faith and a little bit about the Ninja Warrior course that you built in the backyard. And that I can now feel that culture. The way that I do it is I know that I'm not good enough to do it on my own. So I have other people within the group help me do it. Just yesterday, I had one of our team recruiters talk to someone that we're thinking about hiring out in California. This is somebody in North Carolina talking to somebody in California. They're not going to manage them.
Right.
But I needed them to give me feedback. And for that person, I needed them to develop a relationship with someone that they might not really talk to every day, but they now know if you join our organization, there's other people you can reach out to ask their opinion on things. I think that's how I've figured out a way to manage it, Jamie. I know I can't do it on my own.
For sure.
Let me ask you a question as we close a little bit here. And first, since I didn't prep it for anybody that's watching on video, we should give some context. We're at the end of April here. Who knows? We might repost this 6 months from now and on and on. Jamie doesn't always work from home, but he is right now with everything that's going on with stay-at-home orders and what we're dealing with right now, which is also why we see the kiddos running around in the background, which is the by far the best backdrop I've seen so far on any video podcast that we've had. I mean, changing subjects and then starting to close it out a little bit. I got a question for you. Everybody's dealing with very strange emotions right now. And you can't fault people for reacting in strange ways because of the news they're reading or what they're seeing on television or what they're dealing with their job or their family or whatever the case may be. We all should be looking for ways to take a breath. So I'm curious, whether it's today or 6 months ago, what are some of the things that Jamie does to refresh his brain? So when you have a tough day at work or a tough week, what are some of the things outside of the office that you do that gives you that juice to get positive again and take the next step the next day?
Yeah, so I think that's a really important thing right now. Your mindset is critically important, and my wife will attest to you that if I don't get some type of physical workout in the morning, I know you do CrossFit. I've got a rig and a self-built ninja course in the back, right? Which at some point we'll get a picture up so you guys can see that. But we're at this point where you can have a generational changing mindset. We talk about this with our kids all the time. Finally, by the way, homeschool kids win. Our kids have been homeschooled for 6 years, like real homeschool, not school at home.
Yeah. You're the leaders now.
Yeah, what we talk to them about is when their friends are on there or we're on there and they're like, "Oh, I'm so bored," or "Things are so hard." No. It's not boring or hard. It's a blessing. Look, Dad's home. We get to go on a bike ride. We get to go outside and play. Look, we live in a beautiful place on a beautiful piece of property. It's all about where's the positive nature to that. Now, my wife will tell you my positivity sometimes drives her crazy, but I really think that as a fundamental, as a discipline, that I can choose to do one of two things. I can either look for the good and I can get up and do the next right thing, which is what gives me juice, right? Whenever I hang up with a recruit and I've learned a little bit about somebody, a little bit depth of somebody else's story, I love that. That gives me energy. Mm-hmm. When I get a good workout in the morning, that gives me energy. When I don't, she will attest, I'm not as happy a camper as I probably should be. So I think it's all mindset. There's some discipline behind it. This opportunity that you and I have right now, people are actually answering the phone because they want to talk to somebody. They want to share what's going on in their world. And so it's just that change of mindset that when you stay in it, it's awesome. And so at the end of the day, you're exhausted, but you're exhausted from a great, fulfilling day.
Now, I love that. I think that really is important right now. Me selfishly constantly thinking about, because we all have those moments. When you have that moment, you either make the next phone call or call a mentor and ask for some advice or go for a run, which my knees don't let me do anymore, but go do something, go do some push-ups, whatever, do a CrossFit workout. I think whatever it is that someone can do right now to take a breath, we've been encouraging our teammates while they're working from home, put it on your calendar every couple of hours to take a 10-minute break and go outside and listen to the birds chirp. Take a picture, send it to the team, take a breath. Those things are really, really valuable right now for sure. Anything else you want to throw out before we close? Anything that was top of mind for you or anything, on a quote real podcast where there's sponsors and somebody's making money, you'd ask what anything you want to promote? I'll ask the question.
Yeah, no, really, there's really not. I mean, we could go on and on a bunch of different rabbit trails. There is one question I wanted to ask you, though, that's really relevant. You and I have been doing this a long time.
Yep.
Right. And I wanted to ask you, how do you on your end, how do you see the LO's role? How much has it changed and how much has it stayed the same over the last 20 years?
Oh my gosh. That's actually a question I'd written down to ask you.
This is a great topic for you too, because we've talked for a while about what the future of the LO looks like, for sure. That's a great question.
It's a great question.
20 minutes, I think, to do that.
We might need to do a part 2. I'm going to answer the question, and then we'll come back and we'll do a part 2 from the Ninja Warrior course. Maybe we'll do it live. We'll have to go out there. Say that
They
again?
call it a tease, right? We're going to tease that to the next. You got to come back part 2 to get.
That's a tease. I'm going to give you a quick answer, which isn't going to be a full answer, and then we'll go to part 2 at some point. Okay. Jamie, I think that's a $1 million question. I was on the phone recently with a CEO of a company, 7-8 billion in retail origination only, and we were talking. This was probably 2 weeks ago when the capital markets environment, it was even noisier than it is right now. I mean, it's still noisy, but I feel like we've gotten past some of the initial emotion at least. And I flat out asked him, hey, do you think this is one of those moments in time if the industry is going to make an adjustment about how the originator is compensated? And by the way, when I say compensated, to me, compensation isn't just money. It's motivation, it's culture, it's what's your job description, right? It's all of those things. Do you think that this is a moment where maybe we start to see some of those things change? And he gave the answer that I thought he would. It was the answer that I would have given, which is, well, unless there's some backroom mafioso roundtable where everybody huddles up and says, on this day at this exact time, everybody's going to hit the go button. No, because whoever does it first is going to lose 80% of their sales staff. Like, it's not going to happen. But part of your question is also, how has it changed? Well, I was never an originator. I just talked to them all day long. How it's changed is their role in the process. And it has changed. I mean, I think it's okay to admit that through technology, especially, the efficiencies and the processes and the time spent has changed. But there's other pieces that haven't changed yet. And I'm kind of excited to see how that evolves. One thing that a takeaway from our conversation just now, though, is that how long have we been saying, are we going to reach a point where a mortgage is simply go to CarMax and click a button and get a mortgage? For some people, the answer is yes, but it's this many. And most people still want a person like Jamie sitting across the table to consult with them, to give them some best practices, to set expectations, and to also say, if something goes sideways, I got your back. I'm right here. I can't do that by clicking a button. And so I kind of went off a little bit here, but I think you and I could do 25 minutes on that one alone. I'm sort of excited though to see what happens, because I personally don't think the originator gets replaced anytime soon. I do wonder though how process and economics as part of that role does potentially change over time.
I would agree with that, but I will tell you the human portion of this, just like with real estate. I mean, look at some of the big boys, Open Door and Redfin. How they doing right now?
Exactly.
Right. Exactly. Right. So there is a certain evolution around technology, but the human factor, the idea that you can get really, really relational with that borrower or that real estate partner or that builder, you can't replace that with a button. So
no, and so we can keep saying one more thing. Okay, one more thing on that topic. Something I've learned in the last 30 days that surprises me. The people on our team that are screaming to get back into the office are the youngest employees we have. It's the 22-year-olds. It's the 23-year-olds. They're the ones that, if you read the paper and the Harvard business reviews and things like, which I do, and I like a lot of what they say, and I live by a lot of it, you would think that those are the folks that are like, you're never getting them back in the office again. They're never coming back. Well, why do they want to come back? Because they clearly see the value of the interaction that you can't replace when you're remote and only communicating via, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Google Hangouts, whatever. They're all great, but it doesn't replace that human touch, man. It doesn't. And so that gives me some confidence about the answer to that part of the LO question as well.
I agree 100%.
Hey, Jamie, thanks for coming on. This was great. I love seeing some portion of your family in the background and your wife's voice from time to time chiming in about Friday Night Lights. We'll have you back soon. I appreciate you being on, my friend and my Ninja Warrior buddy.
All right. Thank you, bro. I appreciate it.
All right, Jamie. Yeah, man.